ripple effects from the global health crisis that caught the whole world off guard continue to have long-lasting implications. Even as some things start to return to normal, the factory landscape seems forever changed. Here to discuss how apparel and footwear companies can maintain production standards is Jose Suarez, founder of Vaēso, a digital shop floor execution system focused on providing real-time visibility to your shop floor. Welcome, Jose.
Welcome, Eddie. Nice to be back with you.
Same to you. So my first question for you today is, the initial impact of the pandemic was shuttered factories. What did the closures in the early days teach the industry about their supply chains and their vulnerabilities?
So I think we learned two major lessons, Eddie, is that when we started ramping up factories end of February, early March, that we realized that China was starting to get COVID under control. Most retailers and brands in our industry, and I say most to be kind, but probably 100%, had no visibility to the shop floor. And they were all scurrying. They didn't know how many artisans, in Vaēso, we call the workers or operators artisans because we're trying to elevate them. Nobody knew how many artisans were back to work. Nobody knew if the factories were up and running. Nobody knew the capacity that they had at that point in time. So there was total blindness as to how to manage and shift production as we started having the factories come back. And I believe the industry realized that they were lacking in digital information with respect to the shop floor. The second thing I think we learned is that in most major retailers and brands, high-level, C-level executives with an army of team members spent the month of April and May analyzing the balance sheets of their tier one, and the larger companies even went down to the tier twos because they understood that there was going to be a major financial crisis that started beginning of April, and they were fearful of the consequences of a lot of factories going bankrupt. Nobody had any visibility as to the solvency of their supply chain. You remember when we had that COVID conference in early April, where I mentioned that we had moved from very quickly in a matter of weeks from a supply shortage in February and early March to, by the third week, a huge demand issue. And I predicted that by the third or fourth quarter, we would start having severe bankruptcies in our industry at the factory level. And that's exactly what's happened. And that's why the C-level executives in April and May started analyzing the financial solvency of their supply chain. And unfortunately, a lot of the small retailers or brands are being hit right now because they don't have the visibility. They don't have the people to be able to look into, the financial books of their suppliers, and they're all scurrying. Even some billion-dollar retailers and brands are suddenly being faced by closures of the Everrights of the world, for example, a major supplier in footwear, and people are having to scurry even back to China to find capacity to meet their demands.
So Jose, as if the industry needed any more challenges, as you mentioned just now, the pandemic completely tanked out consumer demand. And that, coupled with the decision by some brands and retailers to withhold payments for work in progress, meant some factories won't reopen or many won't make it long term. How is the industry going to operate with fewer factories as consumers start to shop again and brands and retailers need to start to place orders?
We are talking to a lot of major retailers and brands that if they don't start getting involved in managing efficiency and quality down to the shop floor, they have a risk of not being able to meet the demands that will start revving up in 2021 as we start getting through the COVID crisis by the second half of 2021, early 2022, because there's a massive consolidation that's going to happen. a lot of small players that produce a lot of volume, whether it's apparel, footwear, are either bankrupt or going to go bankrupt. I mean, we're entering the third wave right now. And Europe and the United States is getting hit badly, and that's going to impact demand. I think less so than March and February and March, April, because the consumers learned that they can continue buying through e-commerce, which has just exploded. If we don't get our industry to improve productivity dramatically with the fewer factories that we're going to have a huge demand issues, and we're going to see pricing going up. In the short term, we're seeing prices going down because everybody is nervous. Factories, whether in China or Vietnam, especially in China, that has excess capacity right now in the lower range products. But if we don't get the industry to move from an efficiency in apparel from 40 to 50% efficiency to 60, 70, 85, which is normally a world-class run factory, and in footwear, from 2 pairs per operator per hour, or from 0.5, 0.6 to non-athletic to like 1, 1.5, or 2, we're going to have a severe shortage, I predict.
So again, you touched on this when it comes to the efficiency, but as the factories are reopening, it became clear that they need to operate at lower capacities to meet the health regulations.
Mm-hmm.
It means the output is less per day. So we talked about the need to improve factory efficiency. But is it possible for the remaining factories to become more efficient enough to make up for the closures and also, the social distancing, the less workers in the factories, to meet the demand at the same time?
Yeah, I think with the COVID restrictions, everybody is learning. There's a lot of documentation by regional or state governments or retailers and brands supporting their factories to disseminate the information on how to run a factory with social distancing. And I think there are very good controls, especially in the more developed markets like China, Vietnam, Cambodia, more problematic in Bangladesh or Pakistan, et cetera. If the retailers and brands start getting involved at the factory level, there is ample room for improvement. As stated before, you could literally take most apparel factories in our industry and over a 5-year time period, double output with the same labor and overhead. You could take a factory from 0.4 efficiency or 0.5 up to 0.8. And that's normally the running rate in apparel in our industry, 40, 45, 50, 55% efficiencies. In footwear, athletic runs about 8 to 1.2 pairs per operator per hour. There's no reason why we can't help them grow from that. The last factory in North America by Suarez that was shut down in 2003, producing very small runs because they were the tail end of the season, right? The fast fashion or the latest small orders. They were producing average orders of 200, 300, 400. They were producing 2.25 pairs per operator or artisan per hour. 17 years later in non-athletic footwear in Asia, the average is 0.5, 0.6. The best factories are at 1.0. So that shows you there's no reason why we can't consolidate factories in our industry, dramatically improve productivity of those that remain, and not have to construct another factory for the next 10 or 15 years if we start leaning out our factories. But the only way that's going to happen is if we get the retailers and brands involved down to the shop floor. And a lot of them are resistant. They buy shoes, they buy garments. And if they don't start getting involved on the shop floor, we're going to have a huge demand.
So I understand the need for efficiency, but what about the impact on quality? So, you're going to have more orders at fewer factories. Even if you could improve the amount of output per artisan, how can production facilities ensure products don't take a hit on quality as they ramp up?
Yeah, that's why we have spent the last couple of years producing our Vaēso shop floor control system. You have two problems. You are having to either, in some factories, go to 2 shifts because of social distancing, or having to bring in a lot of untrained artisans to absorb the volume. Especially, I predict this starting to happen in the second, third, fourth quarter of next year. And when you bring in untrained artisans onto a production line producing apparel and garments, which is not trivial, it takes months to get up the learning curve, if not a year or two, to be a great stitcher. The only way that you can do this is by bringing in digitalization. We need to teach the artisans on the shop floor how to control their quality before they pass it on to the next process. And the way you do that is by digitizing. So what we've designed is a platform where you can actually put a RFID enabled tablet on every workstation, and every unit of product, whether it's a bundle or a single piece flow, will have an RFID tag. And every artisan is going to control the quality of the previous workstation. And that's how you start building in a zero defect culture. And that's how you can ramp up and control quality and not have massive in-process rework, which is wasteful for our industry. And so build up capacity, bring in new people and have them, teach them through digitalization, provide them a digital tool so that they understand the quality requirements of their product process step before they pass it on to the next. So the only way I see it is we need to massively start digitizing the shop floor. It's happened in the auto industry and then the electronics, but we're way behind in our industry.
Well, Jose, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me and Sourcing Journal today, and hopefully you'll come back and join us again very soon.
Thank you, Eddie. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Take care.